Welcome to the third day of UkraineVision 2025. We are very happy that you are here. And we continue now with the artist talk with Anton Shebetko, a photographer, artist, writer, and much more you will know about him during this talk, facilitated by an artist and art curator, Anita Wernström. So, applause and join this talk.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. God förmiddag. Good morning. Dobry den. My name is, as Julia said, is Anita Wernström, and I'm a Swedish artist. My pronouns is her, she, and I'm so happy to welcome you all here today, and a special shout out to everyone that's online. So UkraineVision 2025, for the few of you that maybe haven't visited one of the other events, I've sort of picked up a few bits, sort of just focusing on the visionary parts of having these kind of discussions. And it's a cultural conference festival dedicated to exploring Ukraine identity, history, and artistic heritage in a global context, bringing together leading cultural experts, artists, thought leaders from Ukraine and Sweden. The event serves as a dynamic space for dialogue, change, and creative expression. An exploration of how history continues to shape Ukraine's modern identity. The program challenges dominating historical narratives and offering a fresh perspective on Ukraine past and beyond Soviet and Russian influences. And I hope this will definitely bring us to a deeper understanding of Ukraine's place in the world. On Monday, there's been 4 years of the full-scale occupation from Russia. And for those of you who are not familiar with this place, down here at Sergels Torg, a lot of us, thousands of Swedish Ukraine people and everyone in solidarity met up to protest against the devastation of this war. So I'm so, if you in this context can say, happy to be able to deep dive into your work, Anton, and also just realizing what vehicle art is for us to engage with this kind of history that's breaking out right now. And Anton, you're a Ukrainian artist, a photographer, a curator, and a writer. You're from Kiev, and you currently live in Amsterdam. Your work focuses on the issues facing the LGBTQ plus community in Ukraine, and you explore themes of memory, loss of identity, and multiplicity in history, and the duality, and the role of photography and archival materials, and what role they can play in revealing these stories.
I agree.
Yes, very good.
Yes.
And you obviously have, as an artist, showed in very many different places.
Yeah.
And today, just to sort of get a deep dive into your practice, we're going to sort of look at 2 different works. We're going to start to talk a little bit, we're going to talk about that the whole time, but the self-published book that you've made, which is a very brief history and a subject queer history of Ukraine. And
that's the cover. It's called A Very Brief and Subjective Queer History of Ukraine, and it's a collection of material and the visual research I did through past 7 years. yeah, it's like different visual projects, also interviews, because I usually, when I'm researching, I also interview a lot of people to collect the evidences. So basing my work on oral history quite often.
Yeah, and why do you think your way of working, why is the oral history so important in the subjects that you're investigating?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I was like growing up in Ukraine, there was basically no available material, and there was like a lot of, I would say, repression or marginalization from the state, but also from the fellow Ukrainians. There was like no much available information. So just talking to people and collecting that information was a way to grasp some knowledge. And then also I used to work as a journalist. So for me, it was like very logical, continuation when I switched to visual arts.
I mean, you've been living away from Ukraine for quite some time.
For 7 years, yes.
For 7
yes.
years. But you describe in the book as well as sort of looking at Ukraine's queer movement, you've sort of seen progress.
Yeah, I mean, that's like in the different projects that will be in the slideshow I put together very nicely. So right now, like before that, there was like a very long timeline that I composed about queer history of Ukraine. And when you just like putting them side by side, the years, you see that, for example, there was almost like, I don't know, like you can have 20 dates in the period from 91 to 2014, and then you have like 30 like different dates from 2014 till now, for example. So you see a lot of progress, a lot of movement that started to happen, and after 2014, basically after a revolution of dignity and also subsequential beginning of the war with the occupation of Crimea. But at the same time, there was like civic society basically was born, and I think it helped a lot for queer people to stand for themselves and to be outspoken. So they kind of came out of shadows, I think. And this is one of the parts of the research I was doing. Yeah.
Because without that kind of safe space, you would never be able to actually gather or share these stories.
Yeah, you mean like being in Ukraine and be able to collect the stories, or being in the
Being in the queer community, I would say.
Trying to.
I was thinking that it's a very hidden history.
Yeah, it's a hidden. I mean, it's a hidden history. It's unrecorded history. So you're trying to find the certain traces. You're trying to work with archives. You're trying to put the knowledge you have nowadays on the from the queer theory to discover and describe and to document.
Absolutely. So I think that will lead us on really well, actually, to show one of your video works. And this artwork is 18 minutes long.
Yeah.
And the title is Simiz, or...
Yeah, Simiz, I can briefly describe what it will be about. So Simiz is like a small village on the southeast coast of Crimea. And they're basically a place where was underground queer gay resort. So it started in, no one knows when it started exactly, so there is like no proper date. I didn't manage to find it. But like kind of officially, it started in the late Soviet Union and started with a nude beach where people were going, mostly gay men. And then there was like basically one gay bar in Crimea was in that village, which was constantly operating. It called Hedgehogs. And so the movie I composed is collection made out of the collection 4,000 images I collected about the place from the queer pictures. And also it includes some other found footage. So I think we can just watch the movie and then continue.
Yeah, thank you.
so this is the part of the way how it works. So it has oral history, and it's also like work extensively with archives that I'm collecting, or that are available. I'm collecting them from open sources quite often.
How important is this work or this place as a part of like creating a modern narrative of Ukraine?
I think it's very important because the place was not really recorded. This part of the history of Crimea is not really, I think, discussed or like talking about, and I think it's very important to talk about it because I think this is also a very perfect example of what happens when Russia comes and the place kind of cease to exist. Like right now, when so it was recorded before, like maybe in 2021. And when I talk now, because also Russia changed their laws about LGBTQIA plus people, so now you just go to prison. So now even the last sense of freedom there is just basically disappeared. I've heard that, like when I talked to Zhana, who was narrating the story, she's now lives in Lviv. She's originally from Kharkiv. And she told me that now they kind of put Chechens as security, and by Chechens I mean like the Kadyrov's Chechens as a security to the place. So basically any expression is not really available there. Yeah, so I think this is very different, of course, approaches because during Ukraine time, if we can formulate it like this, the place was getting better and better and prospering, more people were coming there. Yeah, I mean, of course, it also talks about homophobia that was in Ukraine and still is. But in interesting way, it's also mentioned that the money was shut up the homophobes because it was basically their profit, gay people. So I also find it quite interesting. So yeah, I mean, in my work, I'm also quite, how to say, I'm talking about the problems, and I'm not shy away from homophobia and transphobia that happen in society. I think it's also important to talk about this critically and be able to address it, you know, in the work. I think this is also the power of art, and this is why I'm, for example, making art, you know, to be able to address and to reflect on the state of society at this present moment, first of all, but also in some of the works like that, I'm also looking on the history, to record the history, something that was not present. Because, for example, if that work wouldn't exist, you know, like Russia at a certain point would have very successfully erased their own, every notion about the place from history books. You don't know how it will be like in 20 years, what will happen in the world, you know, by that point. So yeah, I think just making these recordings is already, and it doesn't mean that the work itself is great or anything, you know, but it's just like the presence of the record is something that leaves a certain trace, and I found it very important. Can we maybe put like a slideshow again?
Yeah, I really enjoyed and thought it was super crucial how you've been working visually as well with this sort of found footage in that tradition. And we were also thinking about, you know, how do we preserve photography? And you get that sort of feeling that you have all of these printouts that's then you've then been sort of treated with water.
Yeah, in this, like in that particular film, so I was thinking about the idea of disappearing, washing away, so it was like made out of the prints that was treated with water, and then that gave that effect of the discoloring, but also like, you know, mixing of the colors, but then washing away. So also the place is on the sea, so it's quite literally working with the idea that, you know, the water come and, you know, like it destroys like every place, you know, every mountain will be like the mountain where people are hanging out there. Will be also destroyed at some point of time by water. So they will cease to exist as well. And the memory also fades away. So, yeah.
We can just do a quick hand raise. How many people knew about this part of history before coming in here today? Perfect. So that would be...
I'm very impressed. Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
I was
Amazing.
not actually, but
Yeah, because like when you talk, like the thing that the subjects I'm talking about in different projects, when I'm talking about something historical, people doesn't have that knowledge usually. You know, you need to give it in a way. Like with CMEs, it was not really like a lot of knowledge when you talk about someone who is, I don't know, 20. Like I'm 34. When you talk about younger generation, funny, it sounds funny when I say it, but they don't know about it. Like another project I did called Pleska, and this word is also mentioned in the movie a few times. This was like basically spots for meeting for not only men, but just gay men usually, but also lesbians. In Soviet Union, and then this was a certain culture around it that was very different from cruising that you may know from Western countries. And yeah, that culture basically ceased to exist. And when you say this word now to someone who is like 10 years younger than me, they never heard of it, because when they were born, those places already ceased to exist. And if you don't, you know, like if you don't record it, because some parts of the knowledge, of course, it was written, for example, in the books on sociology. You know, like this type would be researched because it's a type of human behavior, right? But it was not really talked through in Ukrainian art. I would say that. So I had this feeling that it's just another way to record and talk about what you find important through another mediums, basically. You know.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's human rights, and everyone should have the right to. I mean, it comes back to marriage and so forth, same-sex marriage, and I think all of these things is obviously in the future to come. But I have one question for you. How do you envision the future of Ukraine art in a post-war context? And what role do you think the artists like yourself have and will play in rebuilding and redefining the national identity?
I mean, so here's the thing that I don't live in Ukraine for 7 years. So for me, it's very difficult, maybe predict, you know, not being at the place, maybe like right now. But from what I know, the well, art scene, and also in particular, maybe I should address the queer art scene. It's thriving. So let's say it's also part of my research that I'm doing right now on queer arts in Ukraine. So it was not really like there was basically one artist who was, let's say, self-described themselves, Anatoly Belov, who self-described himself as, you know, like as a gay man. He was making the works that were related to the subject he found important. But I think before 2014, you would struggle to find someone else in visual arts in particular who was talking about it. There were like some writers, like Agat Angel Krimsky, like Lesia Ukrainka, or Olga Kobylyanska, that was coming from modern Ukrainian literature and modernist, and they were like talking, they were like making their own queer language to describe their feelings, like when you think about Olga Kobylyanska and Lesia Ukrainka, which is funny, Lesia Ukrainka and our national currency. So we have 3 queer people on Ukrainian national currency, but this is another subject that people doesn't really like to talk about. So Lesia Ukrainka had this very specific writing with Olga Kobylyanska to describe each other, to talk about emotion, to talk about their feelings, but maybe not having the specific language we have right now. They were making their own language. Yeah. So I'm not entirely sure how to answer that, because I don't know what the future holds, but I really hope that the work I'm doing and a lot of other Ukrainian queer artists are doing will, first of all, you know, like I mean, I know, I think, and I know it's actually changed the people's views on the society. I mean, like this work is on display right now. It's about Ukrainian queer soldiers that I did in 2018, and that was not really a topic to discuss at the time when I did, and it had a lot of negative commentary, you know, but also it was interestingly used by Russian for their propaganda to talk about the Western fags in Ukrainian army. So interesting way to look at the subject. So I know that this work in particular, for example, after making it, one of the participants, Viktor Pilipenko, who was veteran, it was in 2018, he made a coming out, and then he created the Union of Queer Soldiers. That before the war, I think there were like 130 people. Now there are like 600 people. They taking parts in the fight, like directly. So and because of their movement, they're changing the views in society on the topic, because it's how to say, like the most respected person in Ukraine right now is a soldier. And of course, to talk about, you know, that soldiers like also can be anyone, you know, like for the ethnicity, nationality, queer people, we all, you know, like can be in Ukrainian army. I think it's very important to change the perception of people in general, which is actually like, and it's not, I'm just talking, there is evidences by polls, you know, that it's, I think, actually, they're LGBTQI plus soldiers. They have this union. I think they conducted a very big poll that they will present soon. And I think like one of the findings was like 62% of Ukrainian residents. So it's like actual poll, you know, conducted not by just them or collected on the internet, but like, you know, it was sociological. 62% wants, you know, like queer people have the same right. So I think this is like big improvement from what we had in 2012 before Revolution Dignity. So it's kind of interesting, right? Of course, how the war impacts different parts in society in the ways that you wouldn't think, like how it in certain way also helps to emancipate, you know, because women go into army voluntarily, they like join forces, they take in the different jobs. So this is something that is also happens as outcome of war.
And you've been nominated as well for the Pinshu Art Prize in Kiev.
Yeah, that will be, but it opens in less than 1 week.
Yeah.
But it will be there from till mid-July, so I don't really expect that someone of the audience will go there. But I'm curating the exhibition in Berlin on Ukrainian queer art in Svulis Museum, and that opens in the mid-June, and it will be there till the 1st of December. So if someone will be in Berlin, you're very welcome, and there will be actually, we will be talking about the queer art that was created after 91 and how the people, different artists works with their archives, and till the present day. So you're very welcome.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this presentation. And we're going to want to open up for some questions, actually, or reflections. And so we have a microphone here. It'd be great if you can talk into the microphone, because then we actually are online visitors.
Maybe I can have a question. If someone who knows about CMEs can just tell me afterwards, maybe how do they know about it? So I'm very curious.
Fantastic. We got a question here. The mic is coming to you just now. Oh, no, sorry.
Oh, no, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I found out, in 20 years ago, I worked together with a friend of yours, Karol Radziszewski, who's a queer artist in Poland, and we went to make a zine about Ukraine. And so we didn't really know, we asked around, and then we went to Kyiv to sort of see what kind of traces of queer perspectives we could find in visual arts, in photography, and other. And of course, that's when we heard about Simi's. That's when, and so it took a while, but then we conducted a lot of interviews. But it also shows, I mean, from my perspective, it also shows how the process has changed. I mean, 20 years ago, it was really, and also going from Warsaw, and a lot of my friends who, I had been to Ukraine 3 times before this, but most of my Polish friends had never been to Ukraine. And this was really an uncharted territory for them. And we're now not very proud of this issue of the zine, because it was a bit, you know, like we were just discovering things without any previous knowledge. But I know you worked or you contributed with Karol on the new issue on Ukraine, which now shows a lot. How would you, I mean, if we would describe a timeline, sorry for the long introduction, last 20 years, when did queer perspectives really enter into the public realm in terms of art, in terms of film, in Ukraine? How would you describe it?
So, I mean, it was always present, but like on the different levels. Like I did another work that calls like Ukrainian Queer TV Open Archive, so in which I collected the visual presence of queerness in the different media. So like non-scripted TV, then fiction like music videos, theater, movies, and then like in the news. So it definitely changes. So like I think in the 90s it was kind of a period of kind of like very wild freedom in a way. So people were expressing themselves, but you couldn't really understand what was happening. And I think that then that period were gone, because I think the cultural space was really occupied and influenced by Russia. So the people were reactionary in culture in some ways to what was happening in Russia, like with the laws, for example. And then it became a kind of a queer baiting thing, I would say, like in a very weird way. And I think after basically 2014, it was kind of started to spoken in a different ways. You seen the changes in the language of the media, I think, in the first place, right? So like if you in 90s you would the gay activist would go and give an interview. That interview would come out with a tagline that's like, gays are also humans. Like now it wouldn't be impossible, right? This type of the language. So you see how the changes are done, and like in these small things that you can mention basically. And I think it's also related to generational shift, because like when you think about 90s, beginning of 2000s, there was like a generation who mostly come from the Soviet Union, from criminalization, from you know, like a lot of repression and total unacceptance in the society and in the families. So of course they were like afraid to speak up, and there were there were plenty of actually of activist organization, but I think it took. So the first attempt to make a kind of big pride event was like in 2012. It was cancelled, and then one of the organizers was beaten up while he was giving an interview. Then 2013, you had like a kind of small pride, and also like in that work about TV, I'm also collecting this how the prides were recorded by the news. So it's also very interesting how they like talk. Like in 2013, they kind of talk still like about the perverts, you know, about the gay people. But then it has a very big shift, and you see that, you know, like more and more people come in. The first big pride event basically happened 2016. I think like 1,000 people came. The last big one before full-scale invasion was 8,000 people. It's heavily secured. That's what need to be mentioned, right? Because it also has a lot of opposition. But the thing that it was happening, I think, is very important. And now, of course, it's problematic because of martial law. I think this year there was like event, like a pride event, but it was not very big. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Do we have time for one more question? No.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Katya and I'm from Ukraine. And actually, me is a person who was grown up in Ukraine and I'm a little bit younger, I'm 30. And I have a lot of friends who was coming out. And you know what I've noticed? I've noticed that my generation is more open to LGBTQ community and also my friends who are in the army. They are talking more and more about different type of people inside the army, different people, how they express themselves, gays, and etc., etc. And I'm very happy that these topics coming more and more important and society is more open right now. But what I've noticed, I have a younger brother, he is like 10 younger than me. I've noticed that their generation is a little bit closer. If we're talking about like open-minded and ready to
Yeah.
I don't know how to see everything as a normal people express themselves. So maybe you can share some thoughts or maybe
I mean,
what you noticed.
yeah, thank you for the question. It is very terrifying actually, because just very simply, not related to Ukraine, but the poll in UK found out I think the most popular person among boys, I think 15 to 19, is Andrew Tate. If you know who is Andrew Tate, it's very terrifying news because sex trafficker, rapist. So this is the role model the younger generation looking for. So I think it's very scary, and I think we need to do our job on education, and finding the ways to go through the populist hate speech propaganda.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I mean, in Ukraine, I think it's also very. I think it's something I don't know, in generation, but I think it's just the presence of the media, how you've been grown up already with the TikTok in your hand and with the algorithms that just basically push on you, when you're younger and when those populists are not the smartest, most intelligent people, right? They're saying you will be successful. Successful is you need to have a car, and I'm just acting whatever. I don't respect anyone. This extremist masculinity that being present, and of course, when you're younger, you're just getting overwhelmed with that, because still when I was growing up, you have curated media, right? So the people are thinking about what language they use, and I think the biggest populace in the world right now, don't to say those two names, right? But also they don't sound like a very intelligent people. They basically speak in language that can be described in Wikipedia as simple English. So it's not really appealing, I think, to intelligent people. But yeah, that's another topic maybe.
Well, that's fantastic. I would like to thank all the organizers for also bringing this extremely important topic up, and I hope that it will generate and continue elsewhere, and that we can organize ourselves within that as well. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And we